Wyoming Territory. May 1881. Wind moved over the prairie like breath held too long and finally let go. And Willa Owens stood at the edge of her father's ranch house with her fists clenched in her skirts, watching the men arrive. They came on horseback, 4 of them, dressed in fine suits that did not belong to this land. At their center rode Martin Hale, a banker from Cheyenne with too much pride and not enough soul. He dismounted like he owned the dirt beneath his boots and looked her over like she was a prize calf at auction. "Tomorrow," he said to her father, not sparing her a glance, "the preacher will be here by sunrise." Willa's father grunted, his mouth tight as leather. "It's done then." "No," Willa said loud and clear. The men turned. Her father's shoulders sagged. Martin stepped forward. "Your father signed the agreement. This marriage secures the land. You will be my wife." "I will not," she said, chin lifting. Her father looked at her with tired eyes. "I had no choice, Willa." Martin's cold smile barely moved. "You will be ready at dawn." She did not answer. She turned and walked back inside. That night she packed a satchel. She had not gotten far when her father found her by the corral, horse saddled. "You plan to run. I plan to live my own life. He loaned me more than I could pay back, Willa. He would take the land. This is the only way to save it. I am not the price of your mistakes." He gripped her arm, then let go. "Then be smarter than me. Find another way." She rode through the night. She did not cry. She did not look back. By sunrise, she reached the small town of Red Mound, nestled near the edge of the Wind River Range. Her horse needed rest, and so did she. She tied him near the livery and walked into the small general store, hoping for water and quiet. Instead, she found Isaiah Remy. He was behind the counter, tall with sun-darkened skin, sleeves rolled up, sorting through a crate of canned peaches. His dark eyes met hers as she stepped inside, and something in his gaze steadied her. "You look like you rode through hell," he said. "Something close," she replied. He poured her water without asking and handed it to her. "You running or hiding?" "Both." "Fair enough," she drank. He waited. She finally said, "My name is Willa Owens. A man's trying to force me to marry him. My father signed over my hand, but I did not agree." Isaiah leaned against the counter. "And you think Red Mound's far enough to stop him?" "I do not know, but I had to try." He nodded once. "You got a place to stay. I will find work. You can stay in the room above the store. It's not much, but it's warm." She blinked. "Why would you help me?" "Because you look like someone who needs someone to stand beside her, and I have nothing better to do today." She smiled just a little. Isaiah's store was quiet, and she helped him stock shelves and sweep floors. They did not talk much, but he started leaving coffee for her in the mornings, and she started folding rags just the way he liked them. The days passed slower than she was used to, but safer too. Until Martin Hale rode into Red Mound. He came with 2 men, one of them the preacher. Willa was stacking flour bags on the porch when she saw them. Her breath left her. Martin dismounted. "Willa, you've caused quite the delay." She backed up toward the door. "You need to leave. The wedding is happening today, right here." "No." Isaiah stepped out behind her, wiping his hands on a cloth. She said no. Martin frowned, looking Isaiah over. "Who are you?" "Someone who believes a woman's word means more than a banker's greed." Martin's voice dropped. "I have the papers." Her father agreed. "The preacher is ready." Isaiah stepped forward. "I do not care what her father signed. She is not property. I could ruin you." Isaiah folded his arms. "Try." Willa looked at Isaiah, her heart pounding. Martin's face darkened. "If you do not marry me now, Willa, your father loses the ranch," Willa said. "Then he loses it." Martin turned to the preacher. "Proceed." The preacher looked to Willa. "Miss Owens." She shook her head. "No." Isaiah moved beside her. "She is not marrying you, and if she marries anyone, it will be me." Willa's eyes widened. Isaiah turned to her. "It would not be pretend. I would marry you, Willa, right now. If you say yes." She stared at him, everything in her chest rising at once. "I would give you a real ring, a real life. Not because I have to, because I want to," she whispered. "You do not even know me. I know enough. I know you are brave. I know you deserve better. And I know I would treat you right." The preacher cleared his throat. "Well," Willa looked at Isaiah. His eyes were steady, warm, waiting. She nodded. Isaiah took her hand, and they stood there on the porch, with Martin fuming below them and the preacher reading vows. Isaiah said, "I do," like he meant every word. Willa set it back with tears in her eyes. When it was over, Isaiah slipped his mother's silver ring onto her finger. Martin turned his horse without a word and rode off. Willa let out a long breath. Isaiah turned to her. "You all right?" she nodded. "You just saved my life," he smiled softly. "I meant what I said, Willa. I want this, not just today." She looked down at the ring on her hand. "I think," she said, "I want it too," and she reached for his hand. The wind came down from the mountains in slow sighs, carrying pine and dust across the edge of Red Mound. Willa stood with Isaiah on the back step of the store, her hand still warm in his. The preacher's wagon was a shrinking dot down the trail. She could still feel the heat of Martin's anger like a shadow on her back, but it didn't reach her here. "Are you sure you want to keep wearing it?" Isaiah asked quietly, his eyes on the silver band. "I said yes," she replied. "And I meant it." They didn't speak again until the sun dipped low enough to paint the clapboard walls in amber. Isaiah lit the lamp in the kitchen, and Willa moved to help, her hands finding tasks without needing to be asked. She sliced bread while he stirred stew over the small iron stove, neither of them rushing the silence. "You ever lived with someone before?" Isaiah asked, not looking at her. "No," she said. "And you, my uncle for a while, before he took off for Oregon." "I've had no one under this roof but myself since then." She placed the loaf on the table. "I don't mind quiet." "Good," he said, ladling stew into 2 bowls, "because I'm not a talker unless I've got something worth saying." They sat opposite each other. The meal was plain but comforting. Willa hadn't realized how hollow her stomach had gotten until her second bite. Isaiah didn't rush. He ate with deliberate care, like he respected the food. Afterward, she carried the bowls to the basin without being told. She found herself watching the way he moved, efficient, strong, unhurried. "You always live above the store?" she asked. "Built it that way so I wouldn't have to walk through town each night. Winters get bad up here." She glanced at the ceiling. "The boards creak." "I'll fix them," she nodded, then lifted her eyes. "What now? Now we live the life we claimed." "I'll make it honest if you'll let it be." She set the drying cloth down. "I don't know what that looks like. We'll figure it out." That night, she took the cot by the window in the room above the store. Isaiah slept across the room on a bedroll laid near the wall. He didn't try to close the space between them. He didn't speak unless she did. The quiet wasn't heavy. It just was. In the morning, she rose early and found he'd already started the fire below. She came down barefoot, shawl over her shoulders, and he handed her a cup of coffee without a word. Outside, the town stirred, soft and slow, wagon wheels creaking, roosters calling from some far yard. He said, "Saddle's loose on your horse. I'll fix it before noon." She nodded. "I can help in the store after. You don't owe me labor." "I want to," he didn't argue. By the 3rd day, she'd memorized the layout of the shelves and started placing new orders on a slip of paper without being asked. She learned the names of the town's women as they came in for flour, or fabric Mrs. Hartley with her wild-eyed twins, Clara Barnes with her long-lost patients. They looked at her with interest, but no one asked too much. Isaiah came in from the back room and paused mid-step. "You sorted the receipts. They were a mess." He leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "You always that orderly, only when things around me feel like they're not." That night, as they closed up, she hesitated. "Are we going to keep sleeping in corners?" she asked. He looked at her, serious as always. "Only if that's what you want." She stepped closer. "I want to know you better." He reached for her hand, slow and certain. "Then you will." She felt the calluses on his fingers, the gentleness in the way he held her, not possessive, not hesitant, just steady. The next morning, she stitched new curtains for the upstairs windows. He didn't comment, but he paused by the doorway a little longer than usual, his eyes catching the change. By week's end, the townsfolk had stopped asking questions. The store ran smoother than it ever had, and Isaiah took to fixing the porch rail that had leaned for years. Willa brought scraps of leftover fabric to mend the worn aprons of women who couldn't spare the coin. She did it without saying much, and they repaid her in eggs or firewood. One evening, as dusk gathered in the hollows between buildings, Isaiah found her sitting on the back step again, her shawl wrapped tight. "You miss your father?" he asked. She thought a long time before answering. "I miss what I wanted him to be." He sat beside her, not touching, just near. "That's a hard thing to carry." "I'm not carrying it anymore," she said. It's just there, he nodded, then looked out toward the hills. You feel safe here? I do, he turned to her. With me, she met his eyes. Yes, he leaned in then, not rushed, not unsure. When his mouth touched hers, it was soft and careful, like he'd been holding the moment in his hands all day, afraid to break it. She kissed him back without fear. When they parted, she rested her head to his shoulder. I married you to escape something, she said. But I think I found something better. Isaiah didn't say anything. He just wrapped his arm around her shoulders, and they watched the stars come out, one by one. The first snow came early that year, dressing the rooftops in white before the leaves had finished falling. Willa stood barefoot on the upstairs floorboards, her breath clouding as she looked through the window at the street below. Isaiah had left at first light to haul lumber from the south ridge, and she'd woken to an empty hearth. She pulled on her boots and coat without hesitation. By the time she reached the edge of the tree line, past the last barn on the south end of Red Mound, the wind had picked up. She followed the trail he'd spoken of the night before, the one that wound past the creek and split near the old trapper's rock. She found him beside a felled pine, sleeves rolled to the elbows, sawdust in his hair. You could have waited, she said, brushing snow from her collar. He didn't look up. Creek's liable to freeze by tomorrow. Needed the timber cut before then. You didn't leave a note. I figured you'd sleep longer with the cold. She crouched beside the sled and helped lift a length of timber, the weight familiar from years of ranch work. He didn't stop her. I'm not made of porcelain, Isaiah. I never said you were. They worked in rhythm until the load was full, sweat freezing along the backs of their necks. On the walk back, she asked, You ever think about the kind of home you want? He answered after a pause. Dry roof, strong beams. Smoke from the chimney. A woman who wants to be there, not just needs to be. She looked sideways at him, the sled creaking behind them. You think I don't want to be here? I think you've had to want too many things at once. A silence fell between them, not strained, just heavy with thought. At the store, they stacked the wood near the side wall, and Isaiah began patching a crack along the outer boards where wind liked to sneak in. Willa brought nails without being asked. Later, while she kneaded dough in the kitchen, he leaned against the counter, arms crossed. You know how to ride, fix tack, cook, run a store. What don't you know how to do? Draw, she said, not missing a beat. Tried once, looked like a cow gave birth to a fence post. He let out a low sound that might have been close to laughter. She looked over her shoulder. I can't sing. Not even a little. She laughed then, a real one, and set the dough to rest under a cloth. That night, she brought down a quilt she'd found in the store's attic, well worn but clean. She laid it across his bedroll without explanation. He said, You didn't have to. I wanted to. The next morning, they shared breakfast without hurry. Isaiah handed her a folded piece of paper. What's this? Ledger page. I started writing down everything we've got. Thought you might take a look, see if I missed anything. She scanned it, then pointed to the corner. You didn't count the crate of butter tins behind the preserves. I always forget that one. She folded it and slipped it into her apron pocket. We could expand. Carry sewing notions, maybe wool. Town's too small to ignore needs. He nodded. You'd run it with me. I already am. Through November, the store grew busier. Isaiah built a small counter along the back wall for new goods, and Willa handled orders from the freight wagon that came every third Thursday. They took supper together each night, sometimes in silence, sometimes with stories of their childhoods as spent between cornfields in Illinois before the war, hers chasing calves across dry Wyoming pasture. One evening, as they swept the porch under a rising moon, Willa asked, Why haven't you asked about Martin again? Isaiah kept sweeping. Because I figure if you want to talk about him, you will. I don't dream about him. I thought I would. But he's gone from me. Isaiah leaned the broom against the wall. You're not afraid he'll come back? No, I think I'm more afraid of the quiet being taken away. He stepped closer, his voice low. This quiet's yours. No one can take it if we hold it together. She reached for his hand. I want to move your bedroll. He met her eyes. You sure? I don't want space between us anymore, not at night, not when the wind howls like it has. He nodded, no rush in him, only a quiet certainty. That night, they lay side by side under the attic quilt, her head on his chest, his arm wrapped strong around her shoulders. The wind came hard against the windows, but inside, the warmth never left. In the morning, she woke to the sound of Isaiah's voice, soft and low, speaking to someone at the door. She slipped into her dress and came down to find a boy holding a letter sealed in wax, edges crumpled. Isaiah handed it to her. Came down from Cheyenne. Ryder said it's official. She cracked the seal, eyes scanning the page, then she let out a long breath and folded it. It's done, she said. The ranch is gone, sold at auction. Isaiah waited. I thought I'd feel grief, she said, but I don't. That place never had a place for me, he stepped close. This one does. She leaned into him, letting her tears come now, not for what she'd lost, but for everything she'd found. She felt his arms around her, solid and certain. Outside, snow kept falling. Inside, the fire held steady. The cellar beneath the store had gone untouched for months, maybe years. Isaiah found Willa there late one morning, kerchief over her hair, sleeves rolled as she sorted through rusted lanterns and mouse-chewed burlap. She glanced up when his boots hit the bottom step. You planning to open a museum? He asked, rubbing dust off a beam as he ducked under it. I'm trying to make room. Half these crates are empty. The other half are filled with things no one's used since Grant was in office. She handed him a bent tin scoop. You tell me what this was for. He turned it in his hand, brow creased. Looks like it might have been part of a grain scale. He set it aside. You sure you want to be down here alone? Floor's not the soundest. I've been listening. It talks to me if I get too close to a weak spot. He chuckled softly, then crouched beside a broken crate. There's old ledger paper in here. Looks like receipts from the stage depot. She knelt beside him, peering into the crate. We could use the backs for wrapping herbs or sewing needles. You always think 4 steps ahead. She brushed a cobweb from her sleeve. Only when I stop being afraid long enough to look forward. He didn't answer that, but his gaze rested on her a long moment before he stood and offered her his hand. Come on, I've got something to show you. They climbed out into the sunlight, blinking against the brightness. He led her around the back of the store, past the woodpile, to the edge of the creek where the ground dipped low and the snow hadn't fully settled. I started clearing this last spring, he said. Figured I'd plant come May, but I never got around to it. Willa stepped into the patch, her boots crunching frost. The soil's good here. I thought maybe now we could make something of it. I've got seed from a man out in Laramie, corn, squash, some beans. She looked back at him. You want to farm? I want to build something that lasts, not just sell other folks' goods. She touched the frozen earth with her fingertips. I used to help my grandmother keep a garden. She said the land listens if you treat it gentle. Isaiah stepped beside her, hands in his coat pockets. Then maybe it's time we start speaking to it. They spent the rest of the day hauling the old crates and stacking them for burning. Willa found a box of beeswax candles that had turned soft at the edges, but still lit clean. She brought 2 up to the room that night and set them on the windowsill. As she lit them, Isaiah leaned by the doorway, arms crossed. You think about your mother much? Willa sat on the edge of the bed, fingers brushing the flame's heat. She died when I was young. I don't remember her voice. Just the way she used to braid my hair. Isaiah stepped inside and sat beside her. Mine passed in '67. Fever took her fast. She used to hum while she worked. I still hear it sometimes when the wind's right. They sat a while without speaking, the candles flickering low. Then Willa reached down and pulled a folded scrap of muslin from beneath the bed. She handed it to him. I found this in the cellar. It's stitched at the edges. Someone meant it for something better. Isaiah turned it over. Could be a tablecloth, or a curtain if we cut it right. He smiled at that, a quiet curve of his mouth. You see use in everything. I want this place to feel like us. Not just yours, not just mine. I'll build shelves in the front room. Make space for what you want to sell. And I'll finish the inventory this week. The new goods'll need labels. He nodded, then reached over and brushed a strand of hair behind her ear. You don't have to prove yourself to me, Willa. I'm not proving anything. I'm building a life I want. His hand lingered a moment longer, then fell to his lap. You're brave, you know that. No, I think I just finally got tired of being frightened. That night, as they lay beneath the attic quilt, Willa rested her hand on his chest, feeling the steady rhythm beneath. Do you want children someday? She asked. Isaiah let the question settle before answering. I do, when the time's right, when the world we've built can hold them safe. She nodded, her eyes on the shadows dancing across the ceiling. I think I'd like that too. Neither of them said more. There was no need. The quiet inside the room was full, not empty. By week's end, the shelves were up and the first crate of dry goods from Laramie arrived, wrapped in burlap and twine. Willa unpacked it with care, arranging tins and sacks by type, while Isaiah added hooks to the rafters for lanterns. The store felt different now, not just tidier, but rooted. Clara Barnes stopped by with a jar of preserved plums. "For the both of you," she said with a knowing glance. "You make this place feel lived in." Willa accepted the jar with both hands. "It is." Isaiah added a second hook by the door that evening, just high enough for her shawl. He didn't say anything, but Willa noticed. When she hung it there the next morning, she smiled to herself. Something had shifted, not sudden, not loud, just steady like water shaping stone, and the store, the home, the land, they were all becoming theirs, piece by piece without hurry. The thaw came slowly that spring, loosening the earth in streaks of brown and green beneath the snow melt. Willa stood in the garden patch behind the store, apron tied tight, hands sunk wrist deep into the soil. It gave beneath her fingers with a kind of quiet welcome. Isaiah hoisted a sack of seed potatoes over one shoulder as he crossed from the shed. "You want rows or mounds?" "Mounds," she said. "They hold better when the rains come." He set the sack down beside her. "You sound like someone who's done this plenty." "Not since I was 15, but the knowing stayed with me." He crouched and opened the sack, dividing the seed into a wooden crate. "You think we'll get a good yield, if the rabbits stay out of it," she said, brushing hair from her face with the back of her wrist. Isaiah grinned. "I'll build the fencing taller." They worked until the sun drifted low behind the hills, their breath misting in the cool air. Willa's skirt hem was damp with mud, and Isaiah's hands were stained to the knuckles. Neither of them minded. In the kitchen that evening, she set 2 tin bowls on the table and said, "I heard from Mrs. Hartley. She's got a niece looking for a place to work. 18 quiet, knows her letters." Isaiah looked up from his stew. "You thinking of hiring? If we're going to keep stocking fabric and the dried goods keep moving, we'll need help before harvest comes." He nodded once, thoughtful. "You want to run the store?" "I already do," he smiled. "Then we'll make room." She reached across the table, fingers brushing his. "You never held me back. You never needed pushing either." That night, they walked through town after supper, boots crunching over leftover frost patches. Willa pointed toward the vacant lot near the mill road. "That land's been idle since the livery burned." Isaiah followed her gaze. "What you want to do with it?" "A schoolhouse," she said. "We're 10 miles from the next one, and most children here can't make that ride come winter." Isaiah considered it. "We'd need lumber and someone who knows how to teach." "I do," she said. "Not formally, but enough." He looked at her, brows raised. "You planning to do everything?" "No," she said, slipping her arm through his. "Just the things that matter." The following week, they posted a small notice in the store window. "Help wanted." Willa wrote it in fine script with a firm hand. By week's end, the girl arrived, a quiet, fair-haired young woman with a soft voice and steady feet. Willa trained her in 2 days and left her with the ledgers on the 3rd, walking out with Isaiah to measure the length of the garden fence. Isaiah knelt to set stakes. "You ever think about what it means to start something new all the time?" Willa said, handing him the twine. "It means you believe in staying." He tied the line taut and rose. "You think we'll always stay here? I don't see why we wouldn't." That night, she found him sitting at the edge of the bed, tracing something with his thumb. She crossed the room and saw the small piece of carved wood in his hand, a bird, worn smooth, its wings shaped with care. "My uncle carved it," he said. "Gave it to me before he left for Oregon. Said it was for when I found somewhere worth calling home." She sat beside him, her hand resting lightly on his knee. "You still had it all this time," he nodded. "Kept it in the bottom of a drawer, waiting." Willa leaned her head to his shoulder. "Feels like this is the place." He turned his face toward hers. "Not just the place. You." They kissed then, slow and certain, the kind of kiss that didn't ask questions or make promises because both had already been answered. The lamp burned low beside them, and outside, the snowmelt dripped steady from the eaves, like time unfolding without hurry. That summer, the garden bloomed thick and wild, carrots and squash pushing through the soil beside rows of beans. The townsfolk came by for the storefront's new stock needles, ribbons, tin buttons. Sacks of flour, and Lai and Willa stood behind the counter with her sleeves rolled and her ledger neat, ready. Isaiah spent his days between the store and the garden, his evenings with Willa beneath the eaves, her head on his shoulder, his hand warm against her back. By the time the leaves turned gold, the schoolhouse frame stood solid on the old lot. Isaiah had built it beam by beam, and Willa painted the door deep green. On the first morning of class, 5 children, wide-eyed and reluctant, filed inside and took their places on the benches Isaiah had carved. When the last wagon left that day, Willa stood in the doorway of the store, apron dusted in chalk, watching the sun settle over the hills. Isaiah crossed to her, a folded paper in his hand. "What's this?" she asked. "Land claim," he said. "The strip behind the garden. Signed it over to us today." She opened it, finger tracing the line marked Remy. "You think we'll need more space? I think we'll fill it," he said. "With whatever we make next." She turned to him. "I never wanted a life like this because I didn't think it was mine to want. It always was," he said. "You just needed room to reach for it." That night they lay wrapped in one another, the quilt soft from years of use, the window open to the sound of wind moving through the trees. Willa turned into Isaiah's arms and whispered, "This feels like forever." He pressed his lips to her temple. "It is. Years passed like seasons turning. The schoolhouse filled, the store prospered, the garden fed more than just their table. Willa taught mornings and ran the store by afternoon. Isaiah built furniture in the shed, outback rockers, cradles, cabinets, and folks from neighboring towns came to buy what he made. One spring, Willa gave birth to a daughter with dark eyes and strong lungs. Isaiah named her June, after the month the garden bloomed hardest. Willa sang to her in the evenings, arm curled around Isaiah's waist, June's tiny fingers gripping his shirt. They built a home across from the store, one with wide windows and a deep porch. Isaiah carved the lintel himself, and Willa planted lilac along the path. They filled it with books, laughter, and the kind of quiet that comes only when hearts have settled into their true place. And when winter came again, with its long nights and hush, Willa would sit beside the fire, June asleep in her lap, Isaiah's hand on her knee, and know without question that this was the life she'd fought for, not borrowed. Not given, built together.